back 1998, when I decided to move to Hong Kong to be the regional APAC regional manager for Chiron. Later on, that part of Chiron analytical diagnostics being acquired by Bayer and the rest of by Novartis. Well, before it happened, I was given this opportunity. You know, I call it given because I requested. And I requested to senior executive of Chiron, I want to be, relocated to Asia. That is the difference, and that is the moment. There is a reason behind this. I got a job in Chiron. You know, it's almost like an American dream come to true. I got a typical 2 cars, 1 small house, and 2 kids, and happily married. And we live in the Albany, this very small town next to Berkeley. It's like typical American dream, but I like to really think through, you know, what would be the life, the next 10 years, 20 years. And fortunately, I have a group of friends who also like to talk about it, who are not really settled what we have. And there's a lot of ideas. One thing pop in our mind is, well, look like, we got what we want. Back then it was very simple. You know, we got what we want. It sounds very, shallow, but today, right? But that's what we think. You know, we got what we want. What's next? So, and each individual have, chipping different ideas. But what I was thinking, and I share with one of the friends who now is very successful, also very, just doing a lot of cross-border activities and entrepreneurs. And he said something really struck me. He said, well, our life is really programmed. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you can estimate what you're going to be in next 20 years. After 20 years, you can have an estimate where you are and what you would be. So I really thought about it. Yeah, it is predictable. If I work for Chiron or big corporation, it's predictable. I even can quantify financials, 401k, in salaries and stock options, everything. It's not going to be a huge surprise. And I'm one of them as sort of not so satisfied with sort of fixed prediction, especially life. So I think that's a seed that's struck us, make us think. So 1997, before 1998, Hong Kong returned to China. It was a huge event, and I think a lot of people take it as granted. But I think in the same year, I think financial crisis, right? And then of course extend to 1998. And I was thinking, despite the financial crisis, China is opening up. And as a Chinese or Chinese American, which place you can make the biggest impact? The answer is very clear. Of course, China, Asia, right? And that's where you can make the biggest contribution. I'm not saying you can't make a contribution in US, but we're considering our own background, our resources, our passions, and that's personal, again, personal choice, personal consideration, evaluation. So the rest of the question is, how do we want to realize that, and how do we get agreement with family? So that's a 10-page story. So I'm going to just pause here. It's a personal choice based on personal passion, and I truly believe the career and the life will be more meaningful if it's associated with a certain social goals and a social environment.
Thanks so much, Dr. Liao. Yeah. Yeah, I just want to share, how ID by DNA, were started. And one of the things, as I mentioned, when we look at it, sequencing has been, so inexpensive and the cost goes down so much. What else we could do? At the same time, it also is kind of like, where the bigger problem is, right? So one of the things, is on infectious disease side. So, I've been talking to, I had the idea like around 2013, but I started talking to friends, but also experts in the field. So around the 2014, I met my co-founder. The 2014 summer, I met my co-founder. So we're talking about, about using the sequencing to help in the infectious disease. Why, there is a need, like unmet medical need in the infectious disease side. So one of the things that kind of struck me is if you really look at the infectious disease, right? So not like, the cancer, right? Today, in the early days, we talked about the cancer based on the how to categorize based on tissue, right? Lung cancer, liver cancer. But today is all based on really, what's the mutation, what, kind of a cause to it, right? So then they have a different treatment. But if you look at the infectious disease still managed and treated as a kind of general category, right? So without the focus of precision. And even we talk about something like a pneumonia, but then the cause of the pneumonia could be 100 different things, right? So it could be virus, bacteria, fungus, sometimes a parasite. So the patients, often kind of managed, without a specific diagnosis, and treated with basically trial and error, and then with a broad spectrum antibiotics. So this is another thing caused, the kind of widespread, the antibiotic. The AMR, the drug resistant issue, right? So this is where we see the sequencing can provide a potential solutions, because, like I mentioned, right? So if we can sequence everything, then from a sample you will see, what's in it, and ideally using computational approach, you can figure out what's the causal, right? So that's easy to say than done, right? So the lot of issue here, one is, of course, how to extract all the like a genetic material out of it, and a lot of samples, they are very low quantity, right? So we're dealing samples, sometimes you don't even see the DNA or nucleic acid extract is not measurable, right? So the other thing is also the computational analysis was a very challenge. I remember when we started, probably around like 2013, 2014 time, or before that, to analyze one what we call metagenomics sample, probably takes like 2 weeks. It's just using like traditional like alignment approach. You have to against the millions of the reference sequence. It takes forever. Today we already improve the process like 2 minutes. So that's kind of things. A lot of things have been done, I think, in the past a few years by us, but also by like academic and other companies in the field. So from thinking of how I kind of myself, right, to like William mentioned, I think it's kind of a personal choice, but also I think one of the things for entrepreneur, really, you have to like it, right? So one of the things is, nothing is really kind of smooth. So especially for a startup, you will always have up and down. So you have to commit for like, it's not a sprint, and it's kind of marathon. So you have to really have passion and really like what you do. But also I think, if you can target to solve a bigger problem with a societal benefit, probably even better. So that's kind of my personal view. I'll pause here.
Thanks so much. So I think while we're on the topic of your journeys into entrepreneurship, could you also talk a bit about how you met your co-founders and how you initially raised funding and got started in that regard?
Yeah, I can start. So I think this is the network, right? So I think the network is very, very important. I think in the end, one of the I see the big factor for success, or whatever you call it, it's a people, right? The team. So you have to, for example, ID by the technology, or ID by, I didn't develop the technology, right? So I actually, met my co-founder, and they've been working on the field for a few years already. So I think one of the things you have to make connection, talk to a lot of people, build your network, and find the people share the vision and share the similar idea. So that's one thing I think is very important. And also for early fundraising, especially at the seed stage, right? So we typically talk, family and friends, family. So that's also very important. I think in very early stage, either you yourself put some money into the venture, or you have friends and the family really believe in you, and they will support you to get you started. So I think back to the the question. This is you have to build your network. I mean, one of the advice I'll give people, you have to build the network and not have a purpose, right? It's not like saying I need to raise money now. I build my network. That'll be too late, right? So you have to establish your network in the early and talk to people who share the same similar kind of idea.
Yeah, I can't emphasize how important the partnership, because nobody is perfect. Nobody has complete knowledge and experience. Of course, you're an entrepreneur. You are in different field, even in the same technical field. But for business, most of us are students. So partner is so crucial. The partner, including investors too. I consider investors are partners. That's why, that's a different topic. You need to carefully select investors. But partner, as a founding partners, especially for me as a first company, CBMG, just small correction here, CBMG now privatized, I believe in March this year. When I was a co-founder and the smallest co-founder of CBMG, the significant major co-founders or the original founders who start idea, want to build a company for cell therapy in China, they are very experienced. They're very savvy in business. They were successful in TMT semiconductor business in the United States. So they are one of the earliest generations of Chinese from mainland, had a similar pathway, had a degree and work in the company and then do business and succeed. So these are the people that I work with, and they taught me so much about a business. Without them, there will be no CBMG. And I was, given the opportunity to be the COO in the beginning, and then move on to the CEO, and then we listed in NASDAQ. Again, it's very fast and uplisted actually 4 years. Without these teams, that's not possible. Now, and that's really a tremendous learning process in the different environment, without VCs, without regulatory policies for cell therapies. It was tremendous. So the second company that with this learning, with this network, as Dr. Liao pointed out, naturally built up in the industry, and the co-founding team were very knowledgeable. Some of them non-technical teams who were from CBMG, and they left for different reasons. And then when they heard I start a company again with different technology and in a similar field, and they joined, with different positions. This is a very critical team because they know what to do, and that's how we made to NASDAQ in 3.5 years. Because we start from clean ground, as a company to be qualified to be listed in public traded market, you need to have a clean legal structure, clean financial accounting records. Lily is definitely the expert here. Before we have the muscle, we have the money to hire those top professional service providers like a Deloitte. You need to have a founding team to understand these aspects. Otherwise, you need to redo the homework. And sometimes you don't have time to do the homework. And that's one of the reasons some company decide to go for IPO, and they found there's so many holes need to patch. And that there is some of the holes you cannot reverse it. It's a history, you cannot rewrite it. So, and takes time to restructure and take another year or half year to have another accounting terms. So having experienced co-founding members or co-founding teams are crucial. Yeah, and then I was just fortunate. I was given for the first company, and then of course I evaluate. They interview me, I interview them when they were looking for a COO and a co-founding member. And of course, I interviewed these people as well. I found they are much more knowledgeable than me. And of course, they are, nice people. And I kind of check it out. They all have good reputations. And so the second founding team, as I mentioned, they are experienced in cell therapy CAR-T company, and some of them are co-workers. So we know each other. That's very important.
That's really great information. I think while we're on this topic, I think a follow-up question would be, a lot of the audience members are interested in starting their own companies. Could you also talk about some of the differences between raising from, I think, friends and family, which Dr. Liao alluded to, versus angels, versus what you think you would need to go in front of institutional investors?
Yeah, I can start. I think it depends on the stage, right? So especially for the life side, I think if you're working on the IT side or the consumer side, story probably is kind of different. I think the investor, because now I think there's a few things that changed from 10 years ago, right? The computational power is easily accessible, right? The cloud-based, basically very inexpensive computational power, but also storage. And so if you're on the consumer or software side, so they will expect you have a pretty much working prototype before you go to the institution, right? So that's why you typically need a seed fund to get it started either yourself or from friends and family. The life science is kind of different. It depends on the project or what exactly you do, right? So sometimes if, for example, if you need a lab, right? So the setup of basic lab probably easily costs you $500,000 to a few $1 million. So it depends on what you do. I think so you might need more than just $100K or $200K. So I think it depends on the stage of the company, and then you'll see who is the kind of a right partner at this time. But typically, I think most investors, but just from my own experience, I think most investors want to see the commitment, right? So if you one of the things is that if you have a job, you're saying, yeah, I want to start a company on the side, you probably don't get any investment other than friends, family, right? So I think it depends on how you started it. I think between friends, family, and angel, I think there are also I think today there are many different angel groups. I think those are very valuable. It depends on a different group. Some group can give a pretty significant dollar amount, but some groups takes longer. I know some angel group, they only meet once per quarter, so it's probably too slow. I think you have to do your own research, in terms which angel group more better fit. But sometimes also, I think it's good to practice the pitch to in front of a different angels. How's you?
Yeah, I didn't have an angel group. My first company, the co-founding team were pretty big, 13 people. So basically what we contribute is cut our salary. And then the major founders, they put it in small amount of their personal monies. There are a few shareholders actually like an angel group, but they didn't exit like a typical angel group, after A round or B round. For Gracell, there's only one, is me, my family, putting money. Other co-founding teams, it really depends, who they are. The funding team that I recruited from previous companies and others, they are not in the status that can, make significant financial contribution, but they take a risk leaving the NASDAQ company, leaving comfortable job. So that's a contribution. So I consider, and that's why they have these original equities. Yeah, so it's my own. It's easier.
Got it. So I think in a few minutes we might move to audience question answer, but I guess before that we probably have time for a few more questions. So I think we're lucky to have two founders today with different backgrounds in I think quote unquote hot areas. So that's NGS diagnostics and cell gene therapy. One of the questions from the audience we had was, how do you see applications of AI and I guess automation, whether computer vision, software, or I guess robotics, being implemented in each of your respective fields in the coming years?
I can answer on the NGS side. So I think for NGS, clearly, we're dealing with a large amount of data, right? So that's why I think for us, we actually using the AI. We do have an AI component in analyzing the patient data, and especially I think on both sides. One is we are comparing with a kind of a large amount of the reference, kind of talking about any microorganism, right? So, but the first thing is you need to have a clean database, right? So we are using the machine learning approach basically to curate and re-annotate on the reference database side. That's one thing. The other thing is when you have the patient, when you have a sequence from patient sample coming, right? So then you compare with your reference, but given the sequencing itself, there's a lot of noise, right? Especially if we're talking about a microorganism, the majority for patient sample, majority is a human, right? So now your signal is buried, with a very high kind of background, and on top of it, you have a contamination, variation, sample collection, the individual variation from patient, and also pretty much all the reagent has a kind of nucleic acid kind of contamination. So how do you deal with all the issues, right? So we do have a machine learning AI approach there as well for the detection. On the automation side, so we haven't getting into much in the automation, but I think that's clearly is a trend I do see in other companies. So in the life science automation side, I'm not sure how much AI was involved in the process, but clearly the automation is another trend for the life science.
From a non-computer data science person, I have really little to say about it, but except the need that I foresee, the combination of AI and gene therapy. Now, very specific question or need here is when we select the sequence for the scFv, which is the antibody or GPS that we put on the T cells or NKs. There are so many choices, right? And especially when now we are doing this bio-specific CARs, which is there's little difference between the antibody drug and the GPS or the sequence we express on the surface of T cells. But the question is, what is the best sequence you put on? Traditionally, you do affinity measurement and then cell killing and other cytokine functional analysis. But I think this is very old-fashioned process. Going through in vitro, of course, synthesis and in vitro and then in vivo animal studies, even after months and a year of preclinical testing, when you move on to the human studies, because it's immune therapy, it will give you surprises. So if there is a way to better predict the sequence of choice, whether it's a low affinity or high affinity or media affinity, and that will be saving a lot of time. And most importantly, you could give a better drug, even its trial, to the patient. During the phase 1, a patient can not just avoid or minimize the side effects, but also enjoy the efficacy. That will be the best outcome. So we are not there yet. Right now, selection of sequence is very primitive based on very limited experience. And I think AI can help by learning what we have learned and what are the important factors and what are important sequence, the correlation, association, that will be helpful. That's just my very, very preliminary thought. Yeah.
And then I guess a specific question for Dr. Cao on that would be, in terms of automation and pain points you see in the cell gene therapy process, do you see any applications for robotics or anything like that?
At this moment, I think in the next year or two, it's going to be very limited because right now the workload for screening is not that large. Now, setting up that kind of service, maybe if there are professional service providers, we can enjoy that service. But for gene therapy companies to set up that resources and the workforce and understand how that help, probably it's a time-consuming, resource-consuming, which may not be the key focus right now. But if there's a service provider, as we have been working with CRO companies, professional sequencers and those genetic testing companies, if they have AI capability and willing to learn that how, what's this world, it's a very complicated gene therapy world, and how do we work together? That will be interesting project. Yeah.
Thank you. And then I think just switching gears for a few minutes before we go to the audience Q&A. Dr. Liao and Dr. Cao, I think you've both spent time, working in the U.S. and China, both sides of the Pacific. Can you comment briefly about, some of the differences between working in the U.S. versus working in China, and then some of the challenges that you've encountered or that you see on the horizon?
I actually, didn't work in China for the last 25 years, so it's a limited. Yeah, so my experience working in China is in like the 90s, early 90s, right? So clearly, I think I just very brief. I think in the life science medical field, I think there's a lot more regulation today than like 25 years ago, right? Like I mentioned, when we met our medical device at the time, we basically make the device in the school laboratory and directly sell to hospital physicians. there was no regulation, right? So I think that's a big difference. I think China now for life science and also the medical field, I think there's a lot of more regulation and not more process-wise. And I think that's something my thinking, needed to if do business in China better understand, those things kind of probably play a bigger role, especially now on the data side, like the data security side as well.
I would be, I wouldn't consider it bluffing to say that I'm a book for this, China biotech development in the past 20 years. I personally experienced the major historical events that happen in China, and that's such a fortunate honor. That I think it's a right choice. So without elaborating too much with limited time, let me give you two examples. So I think share with fellow audience. I think they can at least remember a couple points today. Working in the U.S. depends, what kind of job, which field are you. As a scientist, most of them, I think, people who are interested in entrepreneurship, I think I would say 90% I was with science background. Just to give an example how striking it is, the difference between the attitude towards scientific talent, it's very different. In developed world, for example, like the US, it's less of a sort of a unique. If you got a PhD, if you are expert in certain fields, in China, it's still considered it's a certain status, and the local government investors, they pay a lot of respect. Now it's not just shallow respect to call you doctor so and so. It truly treats you very well, and what you think you deserve. And in the U.S., it's so developed. It's nothing really special. When I was a junior scientist working in a U.S. biotech company, it was a pretty leading biotech company. I overheard, for example, a business person who is always wearing tie and a very neat shirt, and we, as a scientist, wear jeans and T-shirts. He always agreed to scientists like us, with how do you do? Are you doing a good job? And then just walk away. And I overheard in the coffee shop, coffee room, and he was talking to one of the senior managers or executives, saying, how many disposable you have? So I didn't really understand. And then the other person answered, well, our department may be 5 or 6. So I realized they're talking about persons. So later on, I asked that executive who happened to be close to me, and I said, what are you guys talking about? Disposable. He said, well, when reorg happens, the management team trying to figure out how many can be laid off. Remember, I was graduated and get a postdoc training in those top tier schools, and I was ready to win Nobel Prize. At least I thought. And that comments really struck me. That's how business people are thinking about. Now, I'm not taking this as a grudge, but I think turn this into very positive way to treat scientists. Aligned with the local government and investors, majority treat the scientists, especially returnees, so well. That's a striking. To me, sometimes if I say in Chinese, 不好意思, right? You treat me so well, you respect me, because the company need it and the country need it, and also you're all Chinese. and you're valued. Now, most importantly, how do you view this? How do you turn this around? So 2 days ago, when there's a investor friend said to me, we heard you treat your people so well. I said, really? Yeah, then I realized, none of our middle or higher scientists or managers left, unless they have a very clear personal reasons. Like one scientist returned to California after 3.5 years because his wife is, managing 3 kids, and the 2 of them happen to be preteen. So those kind of clear reasons, he has to return. Otherwise, they are working at Gracell happily. Why? I think one of the reasons I was from scientist position. I was a scientist and I'm continue to be a scientist. And I understand their need, what they think, and they have a lot of pride. You can consider them as disposables. That kind of attitude really kills people and a spirit to make a contribution, to maximize their ability. So that's a very big difference. The other difference is obvious. You can see from, read from newspaper, TVs, that China is developing laser speed. Sometimes I have this heated discussion with my families who all live in the States, right? So it really depends where you live, when you spend most of the time. When you spend most of the time in the US, you see more problems of China. When you spend most of the time in China, you see most of the problem of the US. And I travel, I wouldn't say equally, especially in the last 1.5 years, but in the year 2019, I travel almost every month back to the States. What I see is China is laser speed. It's just mind-boggling. I'm sure some of you pay a lot of attention, will appreciate that, or heard about it, agree with that. It is the most striking development in human history. Now, with that kind of background, I think every one of us should at least consider the possibility. How do you be involved? How do you serve the motherland, the countries? And that's the most meaningful thing you should do, not just having mid-class life. So lifestyle selection is not simply your personal, your family choice. It is as a human, as an educated person, as someone who had a capability to make contribution, to think where you can make the most significant contribution. And that's the message I want to give to entrepreneurs or entrepreneur-to-be or investors behind the screen. And this is the difference I think we should think about it. There are imperfections, each country's. There are lots of them. But if we focus on these, you cannot make a move. And I like to, turn things around in a positive way. So thinking China, not just a big market and a great medical resources, those kind of regular information you can get from newspaper and MBA textbook. It is something that it's awakening. I wouldn't say it's Tang Dynasty, but it is a new era of China. The things happen so effectively. And of course, when you move fast, there are a lot of imperfections and there are quality issues. And that's happened to the companies as well. If you want to move everything, compliance with quality, guidelines, you move slowly. And if you want to move fast, you will have some areas you need to patch up. That's very natural. But the need of the market and the opportunities for us as a person to mature, to grow, to make a contribution, it's enormous.
Those are some very insightful comments. I think we can shift gears to the audience Q&A now. So I think for those of you who are maybe not familiar, you can enter any questions directly into the Zoom chat. I think we can start with some of the questions I think that were listed earlier this evening. I think one of the first questions for Dr. Liao and Dr. Cao would be, how have you guys been able to balance you being founders of your companies with having kids and family? Any comments you could make on that, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, I can start. Yeah, I think when you choose to be entrepreneur, right? I think that's a lot of a commitment. I think for people who haven't been in this, I think just to be aware, that's a lot of a commitment, but also a lot of away from family time. I think one of the I didn't realize in the beginning when we started, is just how much time. It's not just that you need to focus on your work, but also you're away from the family. One of the for ID by DNA, when we started, we kind of because my co-founder is not in the Bay Area, they are in Salt Lake. So kind of from beginning, we have like a distributed team, and as we grow and then we became kind of a pretty effective distributed team, but then require a lot of travels, right? So at one point, I think I had probably 100 days, in hotel a year. So I think that's a lot of away from family time. So I think that's it. It's hard to say, how do you balance? You need a lot of support from families. That's for sure. Yeah. So I think this is a commitment, and also that's kind of a sacrifice from the family time. Yeah, I'll pause.
Dr. Lake Dai asked me a question privately, but I think it's an interesting question. I could share with the audience and everybody here. The question is, what do you feel regretful, during your entrepreneurship? It's connected to Dr. Liao said. It's a family time. It's sometimes it's painful. How much you lost. Right? It's not just something you can recover. You cannot recover. Right? I have 3 children, as Lily pointed out. Our 3 sons, but regardless of son or daughter, their graduation, their extracurricular activities, their reward time, their highlighted moments, you cannot be sure you're there all the time. So that's why year 2019 and 18, I travel almost every month or every 2 months. It's a physically challenge, international flights. It's not so much about, when we didn't have a chance to travel internationally, you're so excited. To me, it's such a burden. It's a physical tool. Now, I took it, as an entrepreneur, what's coming, and then you prepare for that. And sometimes you suck it up, right? and then you can share with your family, but that's so much you can share. And it really depends how much can be taken, can be shared. And I remember someone say, entrepreneurship is a lonely trip. That's my adding on. Even your families, your loved one cannot truly share with you, okay? Because a lot of things happen in the business side, and there is no point to share with your family members. Really, it doesn't really help. And even your close partners or management team, you just can't share. As a CEO, it's very lonely. Now, the regretful things besides the families, I regret I should have started earlier. I should start when I just got out of PhD, or even not a PhD. And of course, the journey will be different. But I think as an entrepreneur, I would encourage people start early. Me start second company late, but I was really inspired by those stories. Those who is who made really significant contribution to their own industry, including KFC. So never be too late. But that's the only thing if we really want to talk about regretful things. Other than that, I think 99% grateful. There's really nothing to be regret about it, because I was so fortunate to have this opportunity, have this one-way ticket as a life journey.
Yeah, I also just want to add, I don't think in terms of being an entrepreneur, there's anything regret. I think it is there are kind of family time kind of being sacrificed, but it's not really something kind of regret. But I also want to echo, Dr. Chao just said, start early, right? So I think one of the, to start a company better before you're buying a house, right? So if you're thinking about it, you need to pay mortgage, and then it's going to be very hard because you need a job to pay the mortgage. Because the startup, I think we all see successful stories, but the failure probably is more common than success. So I think so start early with a less financial burden. Probably it's a good way to start.
And then I guess, Dr. Liao, along the lines of Lake's question, do you have, outside the family, are there any regrets that you've had on your journey in entrepreneurship?
Probably not. No, I think, this is kind of I don't really see much regret things. Nope.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And then I think another question, I think along those lines is, as you guys are building your company, sometimes the goalposts change for what milestones you may be working towards, or maybe a competitor comes in. Let's say you're working on a product and Roche or another big company jumps in with a competing product, or you have another new startup that raises, $500 million in VC. How do you guys navigate changes and shifting goalposts? And more specifically, how will you work with your team members and investors to navigate new challenges that come up like that?
Yeah, I can say, I think, this is a kind of constant thing for startup, right? So especially for a small startup, your goalpost always changing, right? So we're always talking about it, we, even like today, our team kind of complain, the kind of milestone is always, kind of a moving target, right? I think it is, there are potentially we can introduce more process, but I think as a startup, it has to be agile. So they have to adapt to it. I mean, I think that's not much way around it. And sometimes we're talking about it, we kind of like flying an airplane while we're building it, right? So of course there are a lot of moving parts. So I think this is kind of a reality for a lot of startups. It's not something you can really fix, because as a small, and then you want to achieve a lot more than your resource. So this is the reality. I will put it that way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that anymore. Keep changing. That's one of the survival and development skills. None of the company, I would say very few company start and finish the original design or visions. Now we all have visions. We must have a visions and business plan, business models to start with. But you need to prepare to be flexible and to be able to make a change. Now, with competitive field, taking Gracell as example, CAR-T field is very, very competitive. I would say the most competitive field right now is the mRNA vaccine against the COVID-19. It's a burning hot. Right? Take as one of the mRNA vaccine companies now, their market valuation is greater than GSK. Can you imagine that? A couple of years ago, not even a couple of years ago, 12 months ago, greater than GSK. Just one single product. And the company was near the edge of, broken. And now all of a sudden. So if the CEO, if the team did not adopt what's coming, did not make a decision to jump on this, and nothing will happen. And we just keep going down the hill by raising money. It couldn't, making stay on the old product pipelines. So it is very challenging in the competitive field. Now, when I founded the company year 2017, Gracell, it was burning hot CAR-T field because the first one or two products getting approval finally as a gene therapy for cancer. So our mission is innovation. We must be innovative to solve the bottlenecks of the industry. And I'm not going to get into the details because most audience are not in this field. But I want to say this, even with fierce competition, if you can find industry problems and you're able to solve the problems, you're a billion-dollar company. So that's a vision. And of course, you need a strategy to achieve that goals. So with or without competition, it is not a big issue. The real issue is your company's team, the company setup, the business model, trying to tackle these key issues. What is your vision? I think this is important. That sets the tone and what your company is going to be and how successful when you're facing competition.
Great, and I think we have a few questions from Mike in the Q&A box. So one question that Mike had is for startup partnerships, what benefits and loss do you feel for choosing partners in mainland China in contrast with choosing those in the US? I'm not sure if Mike's referring to partners in terms of co-founders or partners in terms of like BD partnerships between companies. But if you have any comments, I think that might be helpful.
I can share that one. Choosing partners is dependent on your business plan, right? And your resources. There is no formula what kind of partner you should choose. And as I always say, if there is a formula, then all the MBA graduates should be all successful entrepreneurs. And the fact is not. I read the most recent review or TED Talk. If you really want to talk about the most successful or the most important factors for a successful entrepreneur, what are the top 10 or top 3? The number one is, you'll all be surprised. Not a technology, not a business model, not the teams, it's a timing. And I learned so much about it. I would say, yes, that's it, timing. Now, the timing is so important because let's say you want to put together a company for gene therapy. And if the gene vector is not ready, the vector technology is not ready, if the mRNA or the gene technology is not ready, if the regulation is not ready, no matter how good your team is, you will be having a missing part. And a car moving fast, you cannot afford to have a missing part. So that's sort of indirect answer. The partners or what partner you choose. It just, I would say it's luck or it's a timing, it's opportunity. When you have those partners, it's not a set menu. You can just pick on it. When I left the company and I decided to be an investor, and I want to sit on the other side of the table, I got a lot of time because that's part-time job. So I got a lot of time to travel. So I traveled to San Diego, Boston, and of course, Bay Area, and Europe, and of course, China. And I trying to come up with, what's the idea, what's next to do, in addition to search projects for the investment firm. And you just bump into a lot of so-called opportunities, but it really depends how you see it as opportunities, right? There's a lot of people you met. I have no book, just so many ideas floating, but of course in the same field, in cell and gene therapy field. So selecting partners in China or not China, I think largely depends on the business plan. If the business plan involved in China resources, startup, local policy, market, then you must have a China partner. But if it's global market, no, you don't have to. But as a Chinese origin, it will be odd. You don't have Chinese elements in your company. That's really odd. I can't think of why. It's like you hate Chinese food. That's really odd. So, but for investors, I really, want to share with entrepreneur to be. Selecting investors sounds a luxury. I know it's a luxury, that I enjoy because I made a first company successfully. Then the investor I would say very easy, and they come to me, and if I call them, they are very eager to talk to me. But you still need to select, even though you are struggling with fundings. You need to select. It's almost like when you're hungry, what food do you eat? You can't just take any food you can reach. You still want to select the best food, even though you'll be hungry next 2 hours. You want to have the food that suits you. So that's sort of simply put. But if you choose the wrong investors, and I joke about it, but it's not really true, right? I don't take it seriously. It's more serious than marriage, in the way of legal sense. Legal sense means when you're married, if you divorce, there is a legal way to do it. For investor, yes, there is a legal way to do it, but it's so much more complicated. You're going to tank the company. It's very possible you're going to delay, tank the company. So selecting, but how to select the partner, how to select the investor, it's very hard to say. You really, it's a gut feeling, but also need to really know each other, and you sort of investigate, similar to interview executive teams. You need to background check. If you hear any, comments, then you need to be careful. Not all investors are the same, right? Not all the patients are the same. It's the same thing. You need to be selective. The similar question from Lake was, is there any moments that I have doubts? Yes, there are a lot of moments I have doubts. Even a moment that I should carry on. And you'll be surprised that when they are all look good, you still have a moment to feel, it's too tough to carry on. Yeah, there are moments, honestly.
I also want to add to that question. I think it's it's very common, right, to have moments like that, to doubt your directions. I think one of thing my experience, you have to be very critical to your own idea. This is probably involved to talking to your partners, colleagues, advisors, and but one of the thing I think enough discussion, right? But once you make a decision, regardless left or right, once you make a decision, you have to execute. So I think that's another thing, to even sometimes you are not sure, but once you do enough, kind of a internal discussion, checking with advisors, but once you made a decision, you have to execute.
I think we probably have time for, I think, one or two more questions from the audience. I think for Dr. Liao, there's a question from Amy, who's founder at Dance for Healing. So Amy is doing AI-powered telehealth I guess, for mind-body medicine approaches. She asks, how do you manage the long sales cycle in healthcare for any enterprise products where you're selling to, I guess, large entities?
Right. Yeah. So that's part of business, right? I think the business plan. It depends on for example, we work with currently what we call the precision metagenomics, right? So there's a big difference in infectious disease from like oncology or NIPT. For oncology, you can get a result in a week or 2 weeks. Probably it doesn't make a big difference. But for infectious disease, for pneumonia, if people, sometimes people die in 3-4 days, right? So you really need to get a result quick to patient. So then you want to get the test done close to patient, right? So the central lab model, of course, it's a common, but ideally you want the test to be done close to patient. So one of our business model is we actually provide technology reagent to labs so they can do the NGS testing on their own. So then this is involved, like, you basically sell to a hospital or a lab, and then some of them not much experience in terms of NGS data analysis. And then, first of all, you have to sell them the idea. Once they're buying your idea, they have to establish the process, right? Because all those tests we call laboratory developed tests that require, kind of this clears, certified, but also there's regulatory approval, not an FDA approval, but there's like a CAP approval process and the validation. So it is a long process, but this is something, if it's your part of your business model, then you have to build, your whole kind of commercial operation around, taking into this as a part of bigger, consideration.
Thanks. And I'm just curious for the CAP-CLIA, LDT model. Obviously you guys have done a really amazing job of pursuing that in the U.S. Have you ever considered that doing that in China? And like, do you know what the CLIA regulations are for the type of LDT?
Right. I mean, China, there's no. I mean, just my understanding, there's no official LDT, but I think in China they call more like a third-party testing. So they do give a license to not hospital lab, but the reference lab like a DN, KingMed. So they can run basically what we call the LDT tester here in the U.S. But I think the China seems making a policy change recently to allow hospital run LDT. The reason I think it's obvious, technology always move faster than the regulation.
Got it. Thanks so much. And I think we probably have time for one more question, I think, before the panel ends. I think maybe we can do one more question from Mike for Dr. Cao. Mike has a question around the high cost of, I think, CAR-T and other cell gene therapies versus the effects. And I think along those lines, one question I would have is for CAR-T reimbursements, for example. I think there's pretty large reimbursement in the US. I believe mainland China has cut the reimbursement to, I'm not sure, 30-40% of what it is in the United States. Do you see any challenges there in terms of being able to get enough revenue for these types of therapies, which cost a lot of money to manufacture?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair question. The industries must address. The most recent information about the pricing is Kite first product. The price tag is about 1.2 million RMB. And I personally think it is a very challenge for Chinese patients to absorb, whatever left covered by insurance. That's our passion. I'm sure this is really aligned with our vision. We must find a way, innovative way to reduce the cost while making the product, still equally or even highly effective. We are taking a lot of social resources, including investors' money and our whole team's the career opportunity for this. We must believe the product can be manufactured in the market in certain country with reasonable cost or with maximum efforts to reduce the cost to the extent that you can still make money, but also affordable to majority of the patients. And the cancer is not luxury disease for rich people, obviously. Besides certain small diseases, but most of the cancer, including leukemia, I don't believe it's because of our local pollutions and so on. It happens, we see, to everyone. So 1.2 or whatever the price tag, it's already lower than the United States, but still, I think it's too much for Chinese patients. So we must find a way to reduce the cost. It's a good timing because, again, some of the material, GMP grade, can be available in China now. Although the majority of them, as a Gracell, we use imported consumables, and of course, equipment as well. Equipment is not an issue because that cost is, the capex expense is not significant. It's the consumables. So the manpower, that's a small factor. That factor cannot significantly change the equation. So that's a very question. As an entrepreneur in this field, we must continue work on this to reduce the cost when launch the product. Yeah.
Great. So I think we're pretty much out of time. I'll turn it back over to Tianyu, I think, who's
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I want to thank Andrew first. It's difficult, I know, to managing the time with all these good questions. So thank you for being such a great moderator and asking all these wonderful questions. And also thanks our audience for putting all these questions up. And also I would like to thank William and Guochun in particular, for being so open, generous, and authentic. And we've learned so much from your in-depth reflections on your journey of entrepreneurship and your sharing of the insights about the trend in the life science. And also, I want to thank Lily for sharing with us such solid insights about the life science IPOs and also all those links to the Deloitte studies. And very lastly, thanks everyone for coming and joining us tonight. And please follow us, scan the QR code and follow us on newsletters and WeChat. And we look forward to provide you with more interesting series like tonight. Yeah, so now it's the end, and thanks everyone. You can exit now. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.